Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, very glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Another one of those weeks that felt like about a month, but we got there, and we actually do have some more debate material to talk about, mainly the lack of future debates, at least at this point, on the presidential level. Our first martini today is related to yesterday's third martini. Yesterday, in our final martini, we did the story that we saw at the local ABC 7 affiliate, WJLA, talking about new zoning policies being considered in Montgomery County, Maryland. And the lead sentence in that story from WJLA was, under a new proposal, almost every single family home in Montgomery County could be torn down and replaced with a duplex, triplex, 4 townhomes, or in some cases, a small apartment building. That's also the way they tweeted out the story. And so as we posted that, we got a notification later in the day from Patrick Gleason over at Americans for Tax Reform, and I thank him for that, saying that's actually not what the proposal calls for. And he pointed us to the community note that post got, saying, misleading headline, this proposal gives property owners the freedom to build small multi-unit structures on their property, loosening current property right restrictions which prohibit structures that are not single-family homes. It will not impact owners who do not wish to build anything. There was also a link connected to that community note, and in that link, which connects to the Montgomery County Planning Board, it says the Planning Board's vote transmits Montgomery Planning's attainable housing strategies report to the council to consider a set of zoning modifications and other policy changes that would still allow for single-family detached homes, but would also permit duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and small apartment buildings in a more residential area of the county. Now, I think that's still a pretty controversial policy. Zoning policies are in place for a reason. You want some uniformity and some order in how you lay out your communities, but clearly that's not saying that we're going to tear down potentially all single-family homes in Montgomery County. So I'm the one who saw that story, and I apologize that we didn't dig into that further. But also, WJLA, I don't know where you got that lead from, but man, you got some egg on your face here as well.
Well, Greg, while there's egg on the face, I read the same article you did. Nothing smelled funny to me or anything like that. And so I didn't save you from that interpretation of that because, that's what the article said. Now, I want listeners to realize what's happening here. There are some podcasts out there who make mistakes, get stuff wrong, and just don't acknowledge it at all. There are some that will mention it in a very cursory, brief passing thing at the end. This is why you can trust the Three Martini Lunch. Not only are Greg and I saying, hey, we got this wrong, WJLA's interpretation of it was completely opposite. Not only are we spending a whole martini on this, but Greg, I'm going one step further and calling for military airstrikes on WJLA. I think it's time to get tough on this, and I assure you, we will be greeted as liberators. By the way, in a week when people have argued about whether the accuracy of some of the fact checks of the news anchors of national ABC, it's a really bad time for the local affiliate of ABC to botch it this much in the local coverage. And I will kind of note, look, I am the first person who will tell you news is valuable. News is important, and therefore it is worth subscribing. I also recognize people have limited budgets, and they can't. And so if your local newspaper is subscriber-based, you can get to the front page, but you can't really read any of the articles because there's a paywall. Well, one of the workarounds is that local television affiliates very rarely have a paywall. Or they'll give you video of what they do. They'll usually have ads on it on their websites and running in the video. And usually they'll have often a very terse summary of what that audio-visual report is, which means in a certain way, like TV news, not just like what they broadcast, but their internet sites are kind of a local news source that is not easily replicated, which is why you got to get this stuff right, guys, which is why you can't, if the bill says X, you can't say it does not X or the bill does Y. So yeah, Greg and I made the mistake of assuming that WJLA knew what it was talking about, and that what the bill would do was not the opposite of what the headline and the lead and everything else would suggest. Our bad on that one. More bad on you, WJLA. And apparently I do not have the authority to launch airstrikes against the local ABC affiliate. Nonetheless, I think some sort of comeuppance is I'm just saying we should have that as part of the recipe of options for when someone gets something totally wrong like that.
Well, I agree. And in the immortal words of George W. Bush, fool us once, shame on us, fool us. You can't fool us again.
We won't get fooled again.
It's going to be a long time before you hear us saying, all right, check out this story, solely sourced from WJLA. Not going to happen.
Who said we won't get fooled again? The Who.
The Who.
The Who's on first.
That's right. All right. Well, fantastic. Thanks a lot, WJLA. But yes, you deserve to know the truth. And while there may be some serious controversies going on in Montgomery County, and maybe the zoning laws are good or aren't good, it's not what we talked about yesterday. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now. And I think this is a bad martini. In some cases, a double-barreled bad martini. So after the debate, as we mentioned on Wednesday, the Harris campaign, thinking it had won, and most of the polls agree, although the overall polls in the race don't seem to have budged much. Then the Trump campaign said, well, we'll see. But then yesterday, Truth Social, I think it was, Donald Trump says, when a prize fighter loses a fight, the first words out of his mouth are, I want a rematch. Polls clearly show that I won the debate against Comrade Kamala Harris, the Democrats' radical left candidate, on Tuesday night. And she immediately called for a second debate. And then he goes through the litany of things that he believes she and Biden have been terrible about. And then he says she was a no-show at the Fox debate. She refused to do NBC and CBS. Kamala should focus on what she should have done during the last almost 4-year period. There will be no third debate, all caps, exclamation point. So, Jim, he said this also, that he wasn't going to do the ABC debate when she didn't want to do the Fox debate. So I don't know that this is set in stone that there won't be one more, but it's possible that there won't be. And I think it's a mistake. We'll get to the second part of this after we discuss this part. But in terms of what we've talked about since Kamala became the de facto nominee and then the official nominee after Joe Biden dropped out July 21st, is that the media is carrying her water. They're clearly making her not available very much, if at all, for interviews. There's been no press conferences. They're trying to run out the clock. And the only way you're going to check this vibe love affair is by putting her on the spot. Now, you might want to do some prep the next time, if you do it again, to just let this go all the way till November 5th with very little resistance to the Kamala narrative, at least in the mainstream outlets. I'm not sure it's a good move.
Yeah. Look, we could also throw in last night, I guess it was yesterday morning, Trump does a call-in interview with the Fox and Friends morning show. And they pitched the idea of another debate moderated by Bret Baier and Martha McCallum, I think really highly of the two of them. And Trump says no. Trump says, no, I don't want that. Maybe Laura Ingraham and Jesse Waters. First of all, yeah, Harris is going to agree to that. Okay, that's probably likely. Was Alex Jones booked that day? Is there somebody else you want who's even more? So the first problem is he's got really unrealistic expectations of that. Secondly, he should want a second debate. 4 years ago, he did not do well in the first debate with Biden, was always shouting, trying to steamroll over him, all that stuff. In the second debate, he let Biden talk, and Biden's mouth got him in trouble, right? So there's nothing wrong with having that. Like, also looking back, Romney cleaned Obama's clock in the first debate. Obama came back and had a better second debate. Bush did not do well against Kerry. But people point out, incumbent presidents tend to do badly in that first debate. They're not used to being challenged or pushed so much. And Obama, Bush came back in the later debates. So you point this, there's no shame in doing a second debate. We usually get 3. I don't understand why he's objecting to 3. And it's kind of this, it strikes us this knee-jerk reflexive, well, if I agree to another debate, people will think I lost. Well, you kind of lost. Like there are not a lot of people who are going to say, yes, Trump did a terrific job and Harris was terrible. In fact, the general complaint from MAGA world was, of course Trump couldn't win. The moderators were so biased. Well, first of all, you shouldn't be shocked by ABC, moderators not being, and we talked earlier, there were a couple of tough questions in Harris's direction. As you pointed out, she dodged them pretty well. But I think your analysis of it is completely correct. If you are Donald Trump, you need Kamala Harris taking questions and dodging questions and giving bad answers to questions as much as possible between now and November. You don't gain anything by saying, I'm not going to do this. And there's kind of this knee-jerk defensive belief that, well, if I agree to another one, go out and do a better job next time. Even I think you can find a whole bunch of Trump fans who will say, my colleague and boss Rich Lowry pointed out, he really didn't make a strong defense of his economy for up until COVID. And that's probably the strongest thing he's got going for him. And he didn't bring it up. Like, yeah, you can argue the moderators didn't ask about certain things, but you, the candidate, have control over what you could talk about. And you can steer the conversation in the direction you want to go in. So, this, again, choosing not to do this. And by the way, the audience was 60 million on TV, and I think they said another 7 or 8 million on streaming. That's a big audience. Now, the audience for another debate probably wouldn't be that big, but how many more opportunities are you going to get to speak to tens of millions of Americans between now and Election Day? Probably not that many. So it really feels like a declining to take an opportunity to go out and do better, which would increase your odds for winning the election. Oh, by the way, the consequences of this election may well include whether or not Trump goes to jail. You think that would be enough motivation? Which maybe is a segue to the second part of this martini.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, Harris obviously just pressed play on whatever issue was brought up, regardless of what the specific question was. And if you've got an economic record to defend or her record to prosecute, you got to do that. But yeah, one of the things you mentioned on Wednesday was that, well, it certainly appeared Trump did not at least prepare as much as he could have or should have for that debate. And one of the things he was doing was spending time with, I don't even know how you describe her, Laura Loomer. Some would say conspiracy theorist. Some would say just way out there. I mean,
walking psychological Superfund site would be the way I would put it, Greg. For perspective, Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying she's out there, she's extreme, she's crazy, and she's a bad influence on Audra. So when you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, hey, you're going too far, that's a really good illustrator of where you are on the political spectrum.
Here's the latest Loomer controversy. She did post this, and it turned into a question at the White House, which is exactly what the Democrats would have wanted. So you can tie it back to Trump, but here you go.
There is a woman named Laura Loomer who recently tweeted that if the vice president wins the election, the White House will smell like curry, and White House speeches will be facilitated via a call center, among other things. She recently traveled with the former president, and I wonder if President Biden has read these remarks and his response.
Shockingly, Karine Jean-Pierre found them repugnant and said that they had no place in our modern political discourse. And I think you could have to agree with that. You have some Republicans and Trump supporters out there saying any moment spent talking about this is a moment not spending, criticizing Kamala. But look, I mean, who you spend time with, the people you have around you says something about how you're going to be as president. And because she's such a sycophant to him, Trump can't say no to her, and it's not good.
No, first of all, you put the statement from Karine Jean-Pierre. I would also point out that Andrew Dice Clay issued a statement saying, you kiss your mother with that mouth? Show some respect, will you? No, he really didn't. But, for perspective, why is Donald Trump hanging around with this person? And look, on this podcast, you and I have laid out many times, Kamala Harris has a lot of vulnerabilities, right? And, particularly immigration, the border, and the security, border security, and migrant policy, all that. The economy, cost of living, inflation, all that stuff. She's a San Francisco liberal. Polling shows this. If you make the argument against what she's done in government, not knowing that she wasn't black, not anything about her family, not anything about her heritage, if you do that, you're going to score points, and people are going to drift away from Harris and towards Trump. If you go out and you do what this stuff, you're gonna repel people. And I've made this case. You and I have made this case on the podcast many times. And I got into this back and forth with a reader who was really angry that I was pointing out that Trump was not doing what a winning candidate would do. And they're like, Jim, stop complaining and get Trump to listen to you. And I said, look, if I came down from Mount Sinai with 2 stone tablets, Trump still wouldn't listen to me. And the reader's response was, try harder. And I've tried as hard as I can. There's nothing I can do. Never mind the fact that I'm considered never Trump and I'm one of the bad guys and I'm an evil establishment sellout who writes for the Post, blah, blah, blah. Who does Trump want to listen to? Well, apparently Laura Loomer. Apparently this is the person. We're 6 months away, or 6 weeks away from Election Day, right? People start casting ballots in the next couple of weeks. And Trump wants to hang around with her and listen. People have said a lot of what he said on that debate stage was this kind of stuff she was talking about in the days leading up to the debate. This is who has his ear, right? Now, I know a huge chunk of our listenership desperately wants to see Trump beat Kamala Harris. They believe the future of the country is at stake. And I don't begrudge them for feeling that way. I make no defense for Biden, and I make no sales pitch for Kamala Harris. But I don't feel like Donald Trump is acting like the future of the country is at stake. In fact, there was someone who I think was talking to Mediaite, a former Trump advisor. They didn't say who. You don't know whether this is somebody who's still close with Trump or somebody who's very much on the outs, but he said he doesn't take this seriously. Now, I want to believe Donald Trump is taking it seriously, but when you're hanging around with Laura Loomer, by the way, he brought her to the 9/11 ceremony. She's been a 9/11 truther in the past. Why does this make sense to you? Why would you want to do this? And the answer is that Donald Trump has zero impulse control and just does whatever pops into his head, and he won't let himself be talked out of bad ideas. So if Trump loses this election, don't get mad at you or at me or at anybody else or any other Republican. Blame Donald Trump for not making the most of the opportunities before him and choosing to do the worst, stupidest, dumbest option over and over again, no matter how many times people tell him don't do that.
Kamala Harris's record, like you said, is a highly target-rich environment. You could spend all day, every day, talking about her radical positions, her changing positions, her failed record as vice president, and on and on and on. And so you really shouldn't be talking about anything else. And then to embrace people who can only hurt you, but because they say nice things about you, you can't say no. All right, let's talk about something way better than that, and that's how easy it is to keep track of your metabolic health with Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath and lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and then tailors your nutritional plan for the day as a result of that. It also gives you insights on your workout, sleep, and stress management.
Remember, you can't always rant about a nominee who frustrates you to increase your body's metabolism. Your body's metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a whole host of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. And Lumen gives you recommendations to help improve your metabolic health.
So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, on to our final martini now. This is definitely a bad one, and we haven't heard much about the investigation into the attempted assassination of Donald Trump for a while now. We had a couple of very contentious hearings on Capitol Hill shortly after that with then Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle, and I think Chris Wray took a lot of questions about it. Cheadle, I think, was a day after her testimony, resigned. I think she was shoved, and she should have been out. I mean, it was absolutely inexcusable, not only what happened that day, but her conduct. But it's going to end up being worse than a lot of people even imagine, and that's according to Dick Blumenthal, Connecticut Democratic Senator Dick Blumenthal, who is normally not exactly someone we run to for criticism for the current administration, which is exactly what's happening here with the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security. He says, based on what he's heard so far, and he says there's a report coming out soon, but won't say when. I guess it's probably not before the election, but who knows? But he says when the American people find out what he's learned so far, it ain't going to be pretty.
I think the American people are going to be shocked, astonished, and appalled by what we will report to them about the failures by the Secret Service in this assassination attempt on the former president. But I think they also ought to be appalled and astonished by the failure of the Department of Homeland Security to be more forthcoming, to be as candid and frank as it should be to them in terms of providing information.
So what we already do know shows a failure on multiple levels, from Secret Service to Homeland Security. And now it appears like they're stonewalling to the point where even the Democrats continue to be very critical. I remember after the whole IRS scandal broke, Jim, the Democrats were really mad for a hearing or two, and then they just decided the scandal was over. We'll blame it on the low-level employee in Cincinnati. So far, it doesn't look that way because, Secret Service has to protect people from both political parties, so you want them to be doing their job. And right now, it looks like we might be on the brink of being horrified by what did and didn't happen that day.
Now, dear listeners, I have another confession to make. When Greg sent over this topic, I really wanted to begin by saying that Blumenthal found what was in this report so shocking and horrifying that it gave him flashbacks to Vietnam. Just like Saigon, eh, Slick? To bring us full circle on Robert Davi joining us on Monday. But I really, this is one of those times we have to give credit to Senator Blumenthal, and I'm not choking on those words as I say them. Look, left, right, or center, you should not want Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or anybody else in our government being slain by an assassin. And in order to make sure that doesn't happen, we need the Secret Service to be working in tip-top shape, the very best that it can. Yes, it's populated by human beings. Yes, mistakes are almost inevitable on a long enough time scale. But, it's akin to the thinking of the war on terrorism. We have to be right every time. They need to be right just once. And look, based on what we know so far, the fact that this is coming from Blumenthal, I don't know if I buy into any of these. In fact, I don't buy into the theories that the Secret Service wanted Trump to get assassinated, or that this was some sort of secret plot, or that they weren't protecting him. As with most tales involving the government, says the author of The Weed Agency, incompetence and disorganization and, thinking the other guy was taking care of it, or lack of communication, or just general irresponsibility very often can explain things rather than any sinister power behind the scenes. In a way, a sinister power behind the scenes would be more reassuring, because once we stop them, government would work the way it's supposed to. Instead, no, this is the good plan. This is the good people trying to do the best that they can. Although in this case, based on what Blumenthal is saying, it's very hard to believe this. And I'm really glad that a Democrat is coming out and saying this is appalling and unacceptable. If it was from Republicans, I think they're probably this shouldn't be a partisan football. And I think that among some, not just Democrats, I think just among news consumers in general, there'd be a sense of there go the Republicans again. If the Democrat comes out and says, no, this is going to shock you. This is how then that makes you sit up and take notice, because Blumenthal doesn't want to make, look, Mayorkas he's given Mayorkas a pass on everything else.
Sure.
If you say DHS has absolutely dropped the ball here, and also has been there's two sins here. There's a saying in Washington, it's not the crime, it's the cover up. I would point out the crimes are bad and you shouldn't do them. And so I think it's the crime and the cover up. But if there is if there was, appalling incompetence and sloppiness and lack of coordination, lack of communication on the part of the Secret Service and local law enforcement, that's really bad. If they then tried to hide it, and maybe they've tried to hide other incidents, because thankfully, most days the attempted assassins don't show up, right? Most of the time they got a very good security perimeter. Nobody can get stuff through the metal detector. By and large, as far as we know, attempts to kill the president or former president aren't something that happen on a regular basis. But again, over a long enough time span, sooner or later, somebody's going to try to take that shot. And the question is, how can you prevent that, deter that, or, minimize the odds that this person can succeed? I really look forward to seeing it. I wouldn't mind seeing it before the election. I don't think this will be a huge outcome in the result between Trump and Harris. It's not like Kamala Harris is running the Secret Service or anything like that. But again, the buck stops with the president. The buck stops with the person running. And by the way, I have a strong feeling. I think Joe Biden would like the Secret Service to work very effectively. I think Kamala Harris would like the Secret Service to work very effectively. I don't think they're arguing against their own interest. No. Let the incompetent guys stay in job. They'll be fine. It'll never catch up with me.
Remember the fun old days where they were just driving drunk and
banging prostitutes in Venezuela or Colombia?
Yeah. At least at that point, they were allegedly doing their job during the day. But now, that's some real questions about that. So,
Greg, they may have well been trying to penetrate spy rings.
Have a good weekend, Jim. See you Monday.
On that lovely note, see you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings. Please keep those coming. They really do help us a lot. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific weekend. Join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.